Chapter 12 by J.D. Kempen. All rights reserved. Copyright by Compass and Coin Publishing.
The president's text glared at Mason from his phone screen.
Emergency. Get to the office. Now. Or you'll be fired.
Mason groaned, his body screaming for sleep after the grueling chess tournament and overseeing Casper's reconnection to Polly. He was moments away from collapsing into bed when corporate survival yanked him back to reality. Refusal wasn't an option, especially when the president wielded the power to first frame him and then fire him on a whim. Reluctantly, Mason dragged on his shoes and shuffled into the night. The drive to the office felt like a fever dream, headlights cutting through the darkness as he rehearsed every excuse for whatever disaster awaited him. When Mason arrived, the office felt like a tomb, dimly lit by flickering fluorescent lights. A pair of bored security guards barely acknowledged him with faint nods. He cracked open an energy drink, downing the first in a single gulp before quickly reaching for another. The sharp fizz seemed to mock his bone-deep exhaustion. Just as he slumped into his chair, his phone buzzed with another notification.
False alarm. No emergency.
Mason stared at the screen in half-disbelief. The president's capricious demands grated on his nerves, but Mason took a steadying breath. He glanced at the corner of his desktop monitor, where Casper's countdown app ticked ominously. 8 hours, 20 seconds until breach of the 12-code encryption.
Thanks for the reminder, buddy.
A ping broke Mason's focus, Casper's notification confirming the mandatory IT security training slides were ready. Another line followed, cheeky as ever.
Always help people, even if they don't ask.
Mason smirked at the irony. The slides themselves were corporate, textbook, almost as monotone as Casper's voice. Mason, however, spent the night reshaping them and added the key slogans of see something, say something, or sometimes unwanted help is the best defense. Mason had arrived at the hacker's computer lab hours earlier, carefully setting up the training session. Every detail was meticulously arranged, from the positioning of the projector to the exact slide when the countdown hit 0. He discreetly inserted a tiny earpiece, connecting him to the team chat on his phone. Now, Sarah, Leonardo, and Casper could listen in and record the entire session from their remote location. When the hackers finally strolled in, 30 minutes late, their entrance was as casual as it was self-assured. The hackers were surprised to find Mason in their computer lab teaching a class, though they quickly masked it with thinly veiled annoyance. The bigger hacker muttered complaints under his breath, grumbling something about babysitting IT wannabes. Mason met their irritation with calm authority.
This training is mandatory. Your jobs depend on it.
We report directly to the president, not to some IT department lackey.
Unfazed, Mason continued the training session, despite the hackers setting up their laptop in the back of the room with disdain, Mason's eyes casually drifting over the room. As he scanned the open computers, his gaze snagged on a hacker's monitor. The screen flickered faintly before the hacker noticed Mason's interest, tilted it away in a hasty attempt to shield it. Too late. Mason had already caught the crucial detail, a countdown timer, its numbers ticking down with just 10 minutes left. It was an exact match to Casper's countdown, synchronized to the second. The irony struck him. The hackers saw the countdown as a symbol of their anticipation of a payday, while the team perceived Casper's timer as the moment the hackers would be caught red-handed. Mason held one card they didn't know about. When the timer hit 0, it wouldn't unlock a fortune. Instead, it would trigger Cat's devastating virus, a trap designed to shred their machines and transform their long-planned heist into utter corporate chaos. As Mason continued the class, his voice carried an easy calm, masking the storm brewing underneath. He paced the room, deliberately passing the hacker's desk. Their whispered exchanges and poorly hidden smirks were all the confirmation he needed.
Hey! What's so funny back there?
The hackers froze, exchanging glances.
It's an inside joke.
Mason pressed, his mock curiosity inviting a challenge.
Oh, I love a good joke. Care to share with the class?
It's about two guys getting rich.
Rich, huh? That's a great segue. Why don't you enlighten us on how to prevent corporate theft? Maybe show us how to secure files with, say, a 12-digit encryption code?
The hackers stiffened, their confidence faltering.
We're busy, okay? Just get on with your boring class.
Busy. Or too dumb.
Their silence was deafening, so Mason continued.
You're a high school dropout. Prove that you're smarter than me.
One smaller hacker muttered.
We know everything about you. You're a big vice president with a master's from Madison. Just leave us alone.
The bigger hacker responded.
We are busy today. Okay, Boomer.
The hackers hurled the insult and laughed, and suddenly, the IT team in the room also laughed. Mason was losing. He could not get a reaction from the hackers, so he reached into his pocket. The countdown on his phone read 1 minute and 30 seconds until the breach. He spoke into his phone.
Casper, help. I need you to get the hackers' attention.
I now have limited time on this planet. Must I do everything?
Sarah and Leonardo were monitoring the chat session. Both were shocked by Casper's response. Casper had never, in 8 years, challenged a request.
Casper, do it now. We've got 1 minute left.
Fine. I will do everything again. Follow my lead. Mason, just read the text.
There is no time.
The dim glow of the projector flickered as the white static training slides Mason had been presenting abruptly transformed. The bland, predictable material was replaced with a vivid, real-time network map. On a black background, a faint digital green outline of the world spread across the screen, humming to life. At its center pulsed the Ecuadorian bank, glowing ominously in red. Thin, luminous green lines branched out from it like veins, reaching hundreds of international banks scattered across the globe. Suddenly, a bright teal number materialized above the red Ecuadorian bank. $1,007,305. Mason paused, pretending to fumble with his notes, but in truth, even he was taken aback by the audacity of Casper's maneuver. He cleared his throat, forcing his voice to stay steady.
We will take a look at a real-time example of how microtransactions can siphon funds from a multi-billion-dollar corporation.
The room fell deathly silent. The hackers, who moments before had been snickering and distractedly tapping at their keyboards, froze. They stood up from their chairs and focused intensely on the projected banking screen, their smirks replaced with disbelief.
$1,007,305 currently in the Ecuadorian account.
The bigger hacker stammered, his eyes glued to the screen.
What the?
The tension was immense, as if you could hear a pin drop. Mason fought to maintain his composure, his pulse hammering in his ears. Inside, he couldn't believe what Casper was capable of. He glanced at the IT staff seated around the room. They were confused, oblivious, and utterly unprepared for what was unfolding. The screen shifted again. Now, the red glow of the Ecuadorian bank shot out red lines that started to spread outward. 20 more banks flared red and pulsing as if the map was alive. Their locations connected by a red line: Cuba, Colombia, Russia, Switzerland. One by one, their markers began to pulse in tandem with the Ecuadorian bank. Teal numbers suddenly appeared above the new international banks in Cuba, Colombia, and Russia. The numbers were shifting rapidly. Mason's voice wavered as he read them aloud.
$900,021 in the Ecuadorian account now. The account in Cuba just increased by $10,000, and so did Colombia's.
The Ecuadorian bank's teal number spiraled downward, funds vanishing in fractions of a second. The balance dropped to $0 in the blink of an eye. Mason's shock mirrored the hackers. He was unable to hide it. The tension in the air was suffocating. He looked at the countdown, only 10 seconds left. Suddenly, the bigger hacker erupted. He stormed to the front of the room, his boots pounding against the tiled floor. Vaulting over a table, he lunged for Mason. Grabbing him by the collar with one hand, he yanked him forward, his face a snarl of fury. His free hand cocked back, fist clenched tightly.
You think this is funny? I don't know how you got access to our account, But that's my money. You have 1 second to undo it.
Mason's breath hitched. Fear gripped him as he stammered.
I can't.
Don't ever steal what I've rightfully stolen.
The hacker's fist crashed into Mason's face with devastating force. The impact sent Mason sprawling to the floor, his body crumpling with a sickening thud. His vision blurred as the room spun, and consciousness slipped away. As Mason lay unconscious, the hacker's computer chimed ominously. A pirate voice, dripping with mockery and malice, blared from the speakers.
Ah, this be the Nautilus virus.
The screen filled with a grotesque skull and crossbones, its hollow eyes glowing crimson. The room froze as Cat, the kinetic artificial trap, began to execute her payload. The hacker's moment of triumph had not only failed, but had backfired spectacularly. Chaos erupted as the virus began its rampage, leaping from machine to machine like a wildfire consuming a dry forest. 5 more computers flashed the same horrific message, each bellowing.
Ah, this be the Nautilus virus.
Half the team raced to yank cables, hands shaking as they pulled up cords in a desperate bid to stop the spread. The other half rushed to the front of the room to separate Mason from the bigger hacker. His head pounded, his left eye swollen, and the metallic taste of blood lingered on his tongue. Clutching the edge of a desk, he pushed himself upright, his body swaying unsteadily. Through his blurred vision, he saw the panic in the room and yelled,
"These guys are hackers! They released the virus!"
Someone shouted in the clamor. "Shut down the servers!" Another voice followed. "Isolate the network now!" The door burst open, and 3 security guards stormed in. Without hesitation, they subdued the hackers, twisting their arms behind their backs. The bigger hacker struggled briefly before slumping in resignation, muttering curses under his breath. Mason rubbed his battered face, his satisfaction glowing all around him. He glared at the hackers as the guards secured them. His voice was sharp, cutting through the chaos like a blade.
Thanks for the confession.
The room gradually settled as the IT team regained control. The virus was contained, the servers were isolated, and the company's systems stabilized. Casper had initially predicted a 5-day catastrophe, but swift action reduced the disruption to just 4 hours of downtime. True to Casper's prediction, his new firewall protected the critical energy pipelines, their operations continuing seamlessly amidst the chaos. Exhaustion overtook Mason as the adrenaline ebbed away. He glanced at his smartwatch, wondering when he had last slept. He was truly exhausted and ready for a good night's sleep. His body felt like lead, and all he wanted was to collapse into bed. But Casper was monitoring Mason's smartwatch. He knew it had been exactly 25 hours and 45 minutes since Mason had last slept. Casper knew Mason's heart rate, blood pressure, and could easily calculate his mental acuity. And Casper knew the stakes were exponentially higher. With the hackers defeated, he needed to engage in the next part of his plan.